We didn't realize until we were forced out of the closet how hated we were. We created all these little cocoons for each other so we didn't have to feel that hate or know how that hate could play out. And so AIDS taught us that. AIDS taught us how much America hated us.
It's hard to remember now because it was so insane and barbaric, but there were calls for quarantine, tattooing people who had HIV. As a society, we stalled and stalled and stalled, and enormous amounts of deaths took place, but also the epidemic became enormously more rooted.
70% of the country's AIDS victims are homosexual, and in cities throughout the country, gays have become increasingly alarmed. But now they are also concerned about another kind of epidemic, an epidemic of fear that is spreading faster than the disease itself.
As you walk down the street, you can feel people pointing at you, with saying he's one who has it.
I lost my job, I lost my housing, I lost friends, I lost my own individuality.
As the number of deaths climbs, the gay community becomes increasingly angry at a government that is dragging its feet and a society that seems indifferent to the crisis.
As the years go by, people are just getting more and more fed up, and they just want it to end.
Here we were 6 years into the crisis. Thousands of us had been diagnosed with AIDS and thousands had died, and our president hadn't even said the word.
Let's stay together, let's stay united!
Our mayor was ignoring it. The government wasn't spending anything on AIDS research.
In 1986, a new kind of gay rights organization was born.
It was a very strong movement from day one. The first meetings had over 100 people in them. That's big. We grew very fast, and from the get-go, we made national press.
We're wearing all black. Our posters are tombstones.
I started coming here right after the very first ACT UP demonstration, which happened right outside where I worked. I found boyfriends here, I found friends for life, and I lost a lot of people here. I remember it filled with people, sweaty, all fired up and angry and sexy and ready for bear and loving each other and loving what we were doing.
You said come back in a year. Time's up, Mario. We're here. Okay.
We were singularly focused on HIV/AIDS from 87 to 93. It's all we talked about, and it's all we used to build the gay rights movement.
Joseph Campbell.
Alex Zuccotti.
Zach Jones.
Bruce Engel.
As the years go by and the death toll climbs ever higher, the AIDS crisis utterly consumes the movement for gay equality.
It took a while for people to move beyond the confusion and the questions to reach a point where there was this kind of collective understanding within the movement that this was a catastrophic situation. This became what defined us. It was just a nightmare. You know, it was just an absolute nightmare. People didn't know what to do. Everybody was just trying to save people's lives.
If you stayed quiet, if you were complacent, if you wanted to just go to cocktail parties and never discuss it because it was too painful to discuss, that everybody was going to end up dead.
No walking out! No walking out! 80,000 deaths!
And AIDS also transforms the way the world sees gay men.
America had never seen an angry gay community willing to go in front of the cameras, laying down in the streets, demanding to be heard, and in a sympathetic role. And even if they were uncomfortable with the idea of homosexuality, it hurt the country to know that some of its citizens were dying and that the country was doing nothing. That troubled them.
The rise of ACT UP transforms the way that gay men see themselves.
ACT UP really made me nervous. You know, I'm 20-something years old, I'm coming out, I'm in the middle of this AIDS epidemic, and Yes, it's not good, but we're pissing off people.
No more red tape! No more red
ACT UP shut down the Opera House on opening night. You know, made headlines all over the place. Oh, you're making people angry that can help us. And then as I got older, and especially now, I realize ACT UP saved people's lives.
We've never gotten a government official to start liking homosexuals, but we have shamed them into doing what we want.
Our friends were dying. Our family members were dying. In order to move pharmaceutical companies and policymakers off a comfortable position, they made individuals' lives uncomfortable.
You have no right to interrupt this symposium.
You will not learn anything about combination antiretroviral therapy.
There are doctors
if you want
in this
to hear
audience
about
with
that,
AIDS who don't
then
want to
you're
be
gonna have to
interrupted
give us
by
a few
you.
minutes. And that's all there is to it.
What may have looked a little bit like chaos on the outside, there was a strategic center that was rather brilliant. People don't see us. People don't see the enormity of the disease and the human cost of the disease. So strategically, what we're doing is we're making people look at us. The AIDS epidemic illustrated just how far we needed to go to right the injustices that were a part of the LGBT experience in this country. If you thought you knew what it meant to be brave, and then you watched a guy like Peter Staley, and then you say, oh, okay, now I know what it means to be brave.
In the crucible of AIDS, the modern gay rights movement is born.
I do not think that we would have same-sex marriage if we hadn't unfortunately lost tens of thousands of people in this country and millions worldwide to AIDS. AIDS was the biggest coming out event in world history.
Over the course of its history, ACT UP evolves from an activist group to a group intimately involved in drug research and testing. In 1996, its efforts pay off with the first class of drugs that start to save lives.
We became this modern patient advocacy movement where you self-educate and become the experts.
Can we all, before it's too late, begin to understand each other? Will we realize...
We lowered the death rates by 80%, going from zero, where the government wasn't doing anything, to having a $2 billion NIH research budget, all pushing towards those treatments, and ultimately brought those drugs to 8 million people. We just completely shattered their impression of who we are as a people, what we're capable of, how we were taking care of each other, how we weren't limp-wristed and weak and quietly gonna go off into the corner and die. We found our voice, we found our power, and it was because AIDS forced us out of the closet.
As of December 31st, 2000, almost 500,000 people had died in North America. Those who have been fighting on the front lines are exhausted. Many of the movement leaders are dead. And as the crisis ebbs and men who are sick start to get better, the leaders of the AIDS activist movement drift away.
After all that fighting against AIDS and all the loss we had gone through and all the memorials we had attended, we just all went running for the doors and we walked away.
None of the AIDS activists will play a major role in the battles to come. In their wake comes a new kind of movement with a new set of goals.